Hello everyone, and welcome back to my studio space. I'm Katie Silverwings. I am a glassblower and patchwork artist, or textile artist, however you like to call me. Originally from Texas, now living in the UK, studying glassblowing at the University of Creative Arts in Farnham. And since it is both Easter break and still quarantine time, I am working out of my studio in my little nest flat apartment. So you can see up behind me here, I've got the banners that I've already made hanging. The new one that I finished yesterday is up on the wall now, and it just really is happy next to the first one that I made. Good morning or afternoon. It's good noontide for you, Lupe, I think. Anyway, hello. So today I am going to be starting on a new banner. And for this one, I'm going to be doing something a little bit like this. So this is one of my sketchbooks, and for my patchwork banner designs, I put them in I use graph paper, and I kind of just draw up the designs and then stick them in so they kind of drape a little bit. So the one I'm going to be working on today is going to be kind of just related to this design, but I'm going to be using a slightly different color scheme for it, and it will eventually have the stars coming off of it as well, so I'm really excited about that. And this is the color pattern I'm going to be using for it. So this is one of the glass tiles that I've made to put into some of my pieces. I'll grab one of the pieces to show you how this looks when it's in glass in a moment. So this section is actually a translucent yellow, and this is actually a translucent blue, but because of how dense the color is, let me see if I can hold it up to the light in such a way you can kind of see that it's yellow. Because of the density of the color, it will not show up as a translucent until it's blown with clear glass into something a bit thinner. The big red piece you see behind me started off with the little lump of color that looked black as well. So this is what I'm going to be using for some of my glass pieces once I finally get to a point where I can get into a hot shop and make glass again. But for today, I'm going to be making up a bunch of blocks that are like this. And then I will ultimately be seaming those together to make the base of this. And then I'll be putting some patchwork stars. I haven't quite decided on the designs of them yet. They'll probably be similar to this. I'll be having some patchwork stars that come off of them like that. So exciting stuff. This is a bit more of an ambitious banner, but I'm really excited about how it's going to come out. So I'm going to grab one of my glass pieces so I can show you what this ultimately will turn into, and then I'm going to get started with some patchwork. So probably the best example I have of how that's gonna work is this one. So this is one of my test pieces for my project. This is glass, and you can see the single tile here has been picked up on the bottom of a thick glass bubble. Some of you may have seen this when I was taking photos of everything. So it's picked up on a thick glass bubble, more clear glass is put on over it, and then it is shaped, turned around, and shaped again into one of these vessel forms. And the bubble's left thick so that it projects the image of the pattern upward and really just looks like it's sitting on, like it's reflecting pieces of patchwork everywhere. So if I hold this up behind here, you can kind of see a little bit of how that'll look with these colors. It really magnifies what's behind it and projects up what's inside it. So that's this interesting piece of glass. And that's the goal ultimately, is to have a bunch of these sorts of things with the patchwork, but still working on that. So I know I'm going to be making more little blocks for this one because I want them to be somewhat smaller in the individual block this time. I'm just going to go ahead and turn you around to the workshop area here. As you can see, it is yet another beautiful sunny day in Farnham. I have been enjoying the weather even though I can't go out in it, just because at the very least there's lots of light in my apartment, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to start by getting my center blocks ready. So for this, I'm going to start actually with a smaller center block. So everything I'm going to do on this is going to be 1.5 inches wide strips made into squares. So to start with that, I have some of my 1.5" wide strips left over from when I did the small, or I have a bit of one. This is why I have my box of scraps. Can't tell if I'm in the frame or not. I'm not. Okay. So I've got, this is going to be my starting bit here. So this is one of my white strips that I've already cut down from something else. And I'm going to go ahead and just trim this selvage off the end of it. So now I need to get my colored fabric out. So the idea with this particular block form is that it's going to have strips of light and dark on each side and white. Because hopefully this banner will be hanging behind some pieces with this in it, so I'm wanting the patterns to match. So if I want it to match this, my first strip needs to be yellow. So I think I'm going to leave my strips that are already in here the size that they are, because I will probably end up using those again later. So I'm going to get some yellow. And I have a whole bunch of different yellows to pick from. So I'm going to actually start with my duckling yellow fabric. This was when I ice dyed the bright yellow fabric that you'll hopefully see later. I went in and with all the leftover dye and I tie-dyed this. So it's got kind of an overall pattern of these semi-duckling yellow bits to it. It's really pretty fabric. It's light, and it really in life is the color of duckling. It is very duckling. So I'm going to tear a strip off of this. So I need to find my selvages. There they are. And again, I'm using a fabric that I know tears neatly, so I'm going to be tearing along that. Let's see, where's... All right, so I know that this end is my selvage. There are some really subtle tie-dye patterns in this fabric. Originally, I was thinking, oh, I'll take my 3 lighter fabrics that I've done and I'll take them back into the workshop and over-dye them with more color. But that's not going to happen for a whole variety of reasons, not including not even starting on the fact that it is, week 3. Let's see, 3 weeks and 1 day of me being sequestered in my house. And for the sake of my very kind landlord, I don't do any dyeing in my house if I can help it. So I'm going to make my 1.5 inches. I'm going to double check my measurement on here. Yes, that is 1.5 inches strip. So the strips are going to be narrower on this, but hopefully they'll still show off. They'll still be wide enough to show off those patterns. So I've cut into here and I'm going to tear off this strip. I'm also possibly going to take more rounds of color on this set of blocks, so I don't know yet. So there's one yellow strip, and I know I'm going to need several of these because I want to have quite a few blocks of this design for this banner because it's going to be a little bit wider. And actually, so yeah. So I know I'm going to need at least one more yellow strip right now. Actually, I may go ahead and cut 2. Yeah. I'm going to cut 2 more of these yellow strips, and then I'm going to get my white out and cut 2 more of those. So y'all didn't get to see how I did my strips or my centers the first time, so this is going to be exciting. The other way I could do this would be to start with a wider centerpiece, but I think for this one I want everything to be hopefully the same width. And this time, Every time I finish a full round of strips, I'm going to trim the blocks down to be square so that I don't end up with the problem that I had last time. So there's that. And of course, I will have to go through and press all of my strips to make sure that they are nice and neat. And because these are very wrinkly, because with this particular fabric, it was too big to iron when I was trying to get all of this ready to go and finish dyeing. So it ended up air drying, and then I had to tumble dry it because it was still a little bit damp when I brought it home. So yeah, it's kind of a wrinkly duckling. Just to check. All right, yes, that is still the same measurement on the other end. All right, so there's my duckling fabric torn into some strips. I'll hold that up again for the light so you can really see some of this pattern. It does have some nice deeper yellow areas. Just gonna lay that off to the side and get my white out. So I have some white here, and I'm just gonna do the same thing and tear a few strips. So this is the end that's torn. Here's my selvage. So I'm going to save this small piece of white for later, and I'll just cut 3 strips of the narrow white. One. I have some really long seams I'm going to be sewing in a bit. Two. Yeah, if anybody watching has questions about what I do or anything else, do feel free to say in the comments. I will respond to you as soon as I notice what you've said. So there's the white. So now I need to press all of these strips to make sure that they are nice and straight. So there's one white strip. Pull some strings off the side. You can see how nice and flat that is now. I'm going to drape that over my chair over here so it's out of the way. All right, there's the third white strip. Again, if anybody's interested in making their own quilts or fabric banners or things like that, do tell me and I will gladly share some tips on how I'm making these. Or if you just want to make something along with me and send me pictures of what you're doing, that would be great. Because I absolutely love the communal aspect of this kind of work. Patchwork has a history of being something that people can either will do as a group, or people for a lot of women in the history of my country, at least, especially in rural places like Texas, would actually do their piecing at home by themselves and then get together with other women from their family or their community to do quilting bees and things to finish off the quilts, because quilting takes forever, which is why I'm not actually quilting anything for this project. Later, someday, I will do quilts, but right now I'm just doing fancy patchwork. So here's that duckling yellow strip. You can see it's a lot darker right now just because it's not up next to the bright yellow, but it's going to look really nice and tonal when I start mixing the strips together. So there's one strip. There's strip number 2. Just going to hold it up so you can see a little bit of the pattern on it. It's quite a bit more subtle than my other yellow fabric. have to make sure when I'm pressing things to not press more wrinkles in than I'm taking out. And yes, I could press all of the fabric at once and be done with it, but because I'm not using all of it right now, I would just end up having to go in and repress it when I tore it into strips anyway. Although in the future, I am not going to forget to iron things after I tumble dry them and leave them for weeks. So that's mainly what's going on here. If I were going to be cutting this all with a rotary cutter to get specific shapes, I would need to iron the whole piece first, rather than doing it this way. So I'm going to turn my iron off. And now I'm going to bring all of my strips back so you can see them. And I'm going to lay them on here and take a picture of them real quick. Because I forgot to take pictures all the way along with my last banner, so I need to do that now because I'm getting a grade for this, hopefully. All right, photo taken. So now I'm going to take each of these yellow strips and pair it up with a white strip. And I'm going to pin them together, although I'm not going to put a ton of pins in because it's going to be pretty easy to sew. Actually, I might not even have to pin these because it's going to be pretty easy to keep those even while I'm sewing. So I'm going to turn you around to the sewing machine. So here she is. For those of you who have not met my sewing machine before, this is Gertrude. She is a lovely sewing machine to work with. She's a hand crank sewing machine from the 1920s. And she is just wonderful to work with. She makes a pleasing sound when I work with her. And if you'd like to see some better photos of her, I do have those that I posted up last night onto my Instagram, which is at LILFAERY Silverwings, which you can get to through my Facebook page here. So I do post a lot of stuff up on Instagram. Most of it gets cross-posted onto my Facebook page, but if you follow me on both places, sometimes there's stuff that only goes in one place that doesn't go in the other. Anyway, where's the end of this? So I'm going to get these two strips lined up. I know they're roughly the same length because the white fabric is torn from the same large bolt of fabric that my yellow fabric originally came from. I'm just going to line this up with the outer edge of here because I know that gives me that 1/4 inch seam that I'm looking for. And I'm going to start sewing. Now, since I'm just sewing two strips together, all I have to do is make sure that I'm keeping that edge lined up. I have. It's actually up on the wall behind me. I'm just going to tilt real quick to answer that question. It's right there, hanging up on the wall. So yeah, and hemmed nicely. I ended up doing it with the clips instead of with the special foot on my sewing machine because the patchwork seams did not play nice with the special feet for my sewing machine. But it is hemmed, it's done, it's hanging up loosely with my other ones on the corkboard I have above my wall there. And yeah, so I'm pleased with it. It turned out nice. I just am going to have to figure out how to take some better pictures of it to be able to post those on things and to put them in my portfolio and things for my assignments. So far I have 2 wall hangings done, and I'm working on my third one. The one that has been hanging up in the background for a very long time now, I originally was just going to call a test piece, but I think it's going to end up being one of my final ones because I just like it so much, even though it has the pattern, the print pattern fabrics in it, and I haven't decided yet how much I like those, but thank you. I told you this was going to be a long seam. All right, so there's the first one. And actually, I may just go ahead and cut this one up and see how many block centers this is going to yield me before I go too much further. So I need to press this. Time for pressing. Just going to move the rest of these strips out of the way for now. I do need to see how many strips this is going to yield me. So I'm going to press this whole thing into a long piece of patchwork. And I know I want to press away from the white, as the white is going to be the center of the block that I'm making. So I have to figure out how to do this. I think I'm going to go like this. The nice thing with doing these kinds of blocks with more narrow strips is that I'll be able to put more strips in and not have the block get as big as quickly. So I'm going to press a little bit of that, and then I'm going to have to bring it like this so that I can adequately pull this seam open a bit. So it'll press open neatly. So the idea with pressing seams is partially so that they'll lay nice and flat, and partially to help strengthen things so that the seams are a little bit more resilient, which for these, they're just going to be hanging things. But there's always the possibility I may get to a point someday where I go through and quilt them. But in general, with the log cabin blocks, according to all of the expert reading, the experts that I've read their books on the subject, I actually will show you in a bit. I have an